Have you ever sat in a room full of your own family, feeling like a ghost? The laughter fills the space around you. Plates clink against each other as food is passed. Your grandchildren dash past your chair, barely acknowledging your presence. Conversations flow from living room to kitchen, swirling around you, but rarely including you. You've prepared for this gathering, waited eagerly for it, even dressed with special care. Yet somehow your presence has become part of the background, like the wallpaper or that old armchair nobody really notices anymore. They talk around you, past you, through you, it seems. And quietly, in moments between smiles, it begins to hurt. Not just the silence directed your way, but the feeling of having somehow become invisible in your own home, within your own family. The very people you raised, nurtured and loved now seem to look right through you. If you've felt this way, I want you to know something important. You are far from alone. This experience touches countless older adults who find themselves increasingly sidelined in family gatherings, consulted less often on important matters, or treated with a well-meaning but diminishing kind of care that feels more like being handled than being respected. Before we continue, share in the comments, what's one thing you wish your children understood about getting older? I also want you to know something equally important. You are not powerless in this situation. There is a way forward, not by forcing change in your adult children or grandchildren, but by changing how you respond, how you carry your love, and how you honor your own life in these later chapters. The path back to meaningful connection exists, though it may not be the one you initially expect. In today's video, we'll explore 12 powerful actions that can transform your experience of family relationships in your later years. I believe the last one will leave you quite surprised. These aren't quick fixes or manipulative tactics. They are thoughtful approaches built on dignity, emotional wisdom, and self-respect. They may not immediately solve everything, but they can profoundly change the direction of your family dynamics and restore the sense of being truly seen and valued. To help you see this more clearly, I want to tell you a story. Amanda Hayes smooths the tablecloth one final time, adjusting the centerpiece of fresh-cut flowers from her garden. At 68, her movements are deliberate but graceful, a reminder of the nurse she had been for over 4 decades before retirement. The house smells of pot roast, her son David's favorite since childhood, and apple pie cooling on the counter. Everything is perfect, as it always is when her family comes to visit. The doorbell rings, and Amanda feels that familiar flutter of anticipation. It's been nearly 2 months since she's seen David, her daughter-in-law Elaine, and the grandchildren. She catches a glimpse of herself in the hallway mirror as she moves to answer the door. She's worn her blue dress, the one everyone always compliments, and has even put on the pearl earrings that were her mother's. "Hi, Mom," David says, leaning in for a quick kiss on her cheek. The grandchildren, Emma, 12, and Jason, 9, tumble in behind him immediately, asking about the Wi-Fi password and where they can charge their devices. "Hello, Amanda," Elaine says warmly, though her attention is already divided checking something on her phone. "The house looks nice. Did you get a new lamp?" "No, it's the same one," Amanda replies, but Elaine has already moved into the living room, calling out to David about something they need to discuss. Within minutes, the carefully prepared home is filled with activity, but none of it seems to include Amanda. David and Elaine huddle at the kitchen table, discussing some work challenge he's facing. The children are sprawled in different corners, faces lit by screens. Amanda places a plate of cheese and crackers near them, but it goes largely unnoticed. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes, she announces to the room. "Great, Mom," David says without looking up. "We've got a lot to catch up on here." Amanda stands for a moment, then quietly returns to the kitchen. She lifts the lid on the pot roast, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam. For whom, she wonders, has she really prepared this meal? The family that's physically present but mentally elsewhere, or for the memory of what these gatherings used to be, when her wisdom was sought, her stories listened to, her presence central rather than peripheral. She isn't angry. That's not what presses on her heart as she methodically serves the food onto the warmed plates. It's a deeper ache, the pain of invisibility, of being treated with surface politeness, but rarely with the engaged attention that says, "You still matter to us as a person, not just as a role." "Grandma, this tastes different than usual," Emma comments during dinner, the first direct remark addressed to Amanda in over an hour. Before Amanda can respond, David jumps in. "Mom always makes it the same way, Emma. It's just that your taste, buds are changing as you get older." "Actually," Amanda says softly, "I did try something new with the seasoning this time, but David has already moved on asking Elaine about their upcoming vacation plans." The moment, one small opening for Amanda's voice to be heard, closes as quickly as it appeared. After dinner, Amanda declines help with the dishes. "You all catch up," she says, though she notes with a pang that they already are, without her. She stands at the sink, watching through the window as evening settles over her garden. The dishes give her hands something to do while her mind travels. Back to when this house was alive with chaos of a different sort, young children needing her guidance, her comfort, her wisdom. When did she transition from being essential to being merely accommodated? Later, as the family prepares to leave, the visit shorter than she'd hoped, Amanda hands David a container of leftovers and a separate package of cookies for the children. "Thanks. Mom, we'll try to come by more often," David says, the promise as routine as it is empty. "You know how busy things get," Amanda nods, smiling. "I understand." And she does understand. But understanding doesn't fill the silence of the house after. They leave. It doesn't answer the question that haunts her as she carefully puts away the extra place settings she'd optimistically arranged. How did I become invisible to the very people I'm always seeing? That night, Amanda sits in her favorite chair by the window. The house has returned to its perfect order, as though the family had never disrupted it. She picks up a book but places it back down without opening it. There is a heaviness in her chest that neat rooms and predictable routines cannot lighten. "This isn't what I expected," she whispers to herself. She had imagined her later years differently, as a time of harvest, of being valued for her experience, of having meaningful connections with her family. Not these increasingly brief visits where she feels more like a checkpoint than a cherished elder, but as she sits in the growing darkness, something shifts in Amanda's mind. A memory surfaces of her own grandmother in her final years, and how the family had orbited around her with distracted deference rather than genuine engagement. Had she too been part of creating that distance? Had she confused caring for someone with truly seeing them? Amanda straightens her shoulders slightly. Perhaps she has been approaching this all wrong. Perhaps waiting to be noticed, appreciated, included, was part of the problem itself. Her life, her worth, her continuing journey was not dependent on their recognition. And maybe, just maybe, real change would have to begin with her. She rises from the chair and walks to her desk, pulling out a notebook. If things were going to be different, she would need to be different first. Not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that honored the wisdom she had earned through 6 decades of living. She begins to write, not a list of complaints, but a list of possibilities. By the time she places her pen down, something has changed in Amanda's expression. The hurt is still there, but now it's accompanied by something else, a quiet resolve, a glimmer of new direction. She doesn't have all the answers yet, but she has taken the first step toward reclaiming her visibility, not by demanding it from others, but by seeing herself more clearly. The path forward would not be simple or quick. It would require courage and patience in equal measure. But for the first time in months, Amanda feels a sense of hope. Not that her family will suddenly change, but that she can change how she carries herself through this chapter of her life. And in that change lies the possibility of everything else shifting too. What Amanda discovered, and what many in her situation eventually realize, is that the journey back to meaningful connection often begins with a series of deliberate, dignified choices. Choices that aren't about manipulation or guilt, but about reclaiming your own sense of worth and creating the space for others to see you anew. What Amanda discovered in that quiet moment of reflection is something many of us come to understand. Only after years of feeling invisible, the path to being seen begins with seeing yourself differently first. The choices she would make in the coming weeks weren't about forcing her family to change. They were about changing her relationship with herself. And in that shift, everything else would gradually transform. Let's explore the first 6 of these 12 powerful actions, steps that can help anyone who feels sidelined by their family reclaim their sense of dignity and presence. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel if you like this kind of content. Now back to our list. Number 1, disappear gracefully just for a while. This might sound counterintuitive. If you're already feeling invisible, why would you choose to step back even further? But there's profound wisdom in this approach. When Amanda next received a call from David about the monthly family dinner, instead of her usual eager acceptance and days of preparation, she simply said, "I'm afraid I have other plans this time. Perhaps next month." The brief silence on the other end of the line told her something important. Her predictable availability had become expected rather than appreciated. "Other plans?" David had asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Like what?" "Just some things I've been wanting to do," Amanda replied, keeping her tone warm but firm. She wasn't being manipulative or punishing. She was simply creating space, both for herself and in their perception of her. Sometimes it's only in absence that people begin to notice what they've taken for granted. Amanda used this time to join a local book club she'd been considering for months. The evening was filled with animated discussion about characters and themes, with other members genuinely interested in her perspective. For the first time in ages, she returned home feeling energized rather than depleted. When David called a few days later, there was a different quality to his questions. A curiosity about what she'd been doing, even a hint of concern that perhaps her life was changing in ways he hadn't noticed. Disappearing gracefully isn't about vanishing in anger or hurt. It's about stepping back with dignity, creating room for both yourself and others to recognize your value. It's a pause that says, "I matter enough to choose how and where I spend my time and energy." Number 2, reclaim the room they left empty. For years, Amanda had preserved David's childhood bedroom exactly as he'd left it for college. Posters on the walls, trophies on the shelves, the bedspread he'd chosen as a teenager. It had become a shrine to the past, a room she merely dusted rather than lived in. One Tuesday morning, she stood in the doorway of this room and saw it clearly for what it had become. Not a welcoming space for occasional visits, but a frozen moment in time that served neither her nor her son. With careful respect for certain keepsakes, Amanda began to transform the room. She moved in her sewing machine that had been relegated to a corner of the basement. She hung artwork she loved but had never displayed. She created a reading nook with her favorite chair positioned perfectly by the window that caught the morning light. When she was finished, the room reflected who she was now, not just who she had been as a mother to a child long grown. It became a testament to her continuing journey rather than a monument to a completed one. The next time Emma and Jason visited, they gravitated naturally to this new space. "Grandma, this room is so cool," Emma said, picking up a colorful fabric square from Amanda's latest quilting project. "Will you teach me how to make this?" The space Amanda had reclaimed became a bridge rather than a barrier, a place where new connections could form based on who she was today, not just who she had been decades ago. Reclaiming your space isn't about erasing memories. It's about making room for new ones. It's recognizing that your home should reflect your present and future, not just preserve your past. The rooms where your children once played can become spaces where you now create, dream, and grow in fresh ways. Number 3. Send the message you never sent. For months, Amanda had carried unspoken words in her heart, things she wanted her family to know but hadn't expressed, partly from fear of seeming needy, partly from not wanting to burden them with her feelings. The weight of these unsaid thoughts had become almost physical. One evening, she sat at her desk with a blank piece of paper and began to write, not an accusation or complaint, but an honest expression of her experience. "Dear David," she wrote, "there are things I want you to know about my life now, how I sometimes feel when we're together, and what I hope for in our relationship as we both grow older." The letter wasn't bitter or blaming. It spoke of her love, her hopes, the joy of watching his family grow, but also her desire to be seen as more than just mom, to be recognized as a person still evolving, still contributing, still learning. When she finished writing, Amanda read it over carefully. Then, instead of sealing it in an envelope, she placed it in her journal. The purpose hadn't been to deliver these words, at least not yet. The purpose had been to deliver herself from the burden of carrying them unacknowledged. In giving voice to her truth, even if only for herself, Amanda felt lighter, clearer. The action of expressing her feelings had already begun to shift something inside her, creating room for new possibilities in how she carried herself around her family. Sending the message you never sent doesn't always mean literally delivering it. Sometimes the mere act of articulating your truth releases its power over you. It transforms unspoken hurt from a heaviness you carry to a clarity that guides you. The letter may remain private, or parts of it might naturally find their way into conversation when the moment is right. Either way, you've honored your experience by acknowledging it fully. Number 4, create a ritual that honors you. For decades, Amanda's rituals had centered around others. Sunday dinners prepared for family who might or might not appreciate them, holidays decorated to create magic for grandchildren, birthdays remembered and celebrated, while her own often passed with minimal acknowledgement. She decided to establish a new weekly practice, one focused entirely on her own pleasure and renewal. Every Thursday evening became Amanda's night. She would set her table beautifully, the good china, a fresh flower, even a candle, and prepare her favorite meal, something the rest of the family might not particularly enjoy, but that she loved. She'd dress as though for a special occasion, put on music that moved her, and dine without distraction. No television, no phone, just the pleasure of her own company and the food she'd prepared with care. At first it felt almost uncomfortable, indulgent, even selfish. But gradually, this ritual became a touchstone in her week, a reminder that caring for herself was not just permissible, but essential. It was a declaration that her life, even when spent alone, remained worthy of celebration. When her neighbor Helen stopped by unexpectedly during one of these dinners, Amanda didn't apologize or minimize what she was doing. "I'm having my weekly dinner with myself," she explained simply with quiet dignity. "Would you like to join me next Thursday?" This ritual didn't go unnoticed by her family either. When Elaine spotted the special tablecloth and candle holder during a visit, and Amanda explained their purpose, something shifted in her daughter-in-law's perception. "That's actually beautiful," Elaine said, with genuine respect in her voice. Creating a ritual that honors you isn't about elaborate indulgence or isolation. It's about demonstrating to yourself first and then to others that your experience matters, your pleasure counts, your time alone deserves the same care and attention you've always given to time with others. It transforms solitude from something endured to something savored. Number 5. Ask them one simple question. During a Sunday visit, when the conversation had once again flowed around rather than with her, Amanda found a quiet moment alone with David in the kitchen. Instead of filling the silence with the usual questions about his work or the children's activities, she asked something different. "David," she said gently, "is there something I do that makes it difficult for us to really talk to each other? Something I might not be aware of?" The question hung in the air between them. David looked startled, then uncomfortable, but Amanda didn't rush to fill the silence or soften the moment. She simply waited, giving him space to formulate an honest response. "You always seem so perfect, Mom," he finally said. "The house, the food, everything just so. Sometimes it feels like there's no room for anything real or messy to happen here." It wasn't what Amanda had expected to hear. The perfection she'd thought was a gift, a way of showing love through effort, had actually been creating distance. In trying to make everything ideal, she'd unwittingly made herself unapproachable. This single question opened a conversation that continued intermittently over weeks and months. A dialogue that wouldn't have begun without Amanda's willingness to hear something potentially difficult, without defense or justification. Asking one simple question isn't about interrogation or putting others on the spot. It's about creating an opening for truth to enter a relationship that may have become calcified in unconscious patterns. It requires courage to ask, patience to listen, and strength to receive whatever answer emerges without immediately trying to fix or explain it away. Number 6. Start a new legacy with strangers. Amanda had always defined herself primarily through her relationships with family, but as she began to feel the limitations of that definition, she looked outward. The local library had a program where volunteers read to children after school. Children whose parents were still at work, children who needed the warmth of an adult's attention. The first day was awkward. Amanda felt self-conscious, unsure if she could hold the interest of children who weren't related to her, who had no obligation to listen. But by the end of the hour, as a little girl named Maya nestled against her arm to see the pictures more clearly, something profound shifted in Amanda's understanding of herself. Here, with children who knew nothing of her past, she was being valued purely for what she offered in the present moment. Her voice, her patience, her genuine interest in their responses to the story. She wasn't David's mom or Emma and Jason's grandmother. She was simply Amanda, a person bringing something meaningful into the lives of others. This experience awakened something vital in her, the recognition that while family relationships were precious, they needn't be the only source of her sense of purpose and connection. There were people in the world who needed exactly what she had to give: her time, her wisdom, her presence. Starting a new legacy with strangers isn't about replacing family bonds, but expanding beyond them. It's recognizing that your capacity to contribute, to matter, to make a difference, extends far beyond the boundaries of your family tree. When your own blood forgets or overlooks your value, offering that value to others who recognize and appreciate it can be profoundly healing. These first 6 actions represent the beginning of a transformation, not a dramatic rebellion or confrontation, but a quiet reclaiming of personal dignity and purpose. They aren't about forcing others to change, but changing how you exist in relation to both yourself and them. They create space for new patterns to emerge naturally, without demand or expectation. As Amanda continued her journey of quiet transformation, she discovered that the most profound changes weren't happening in her relationships with others, at least not yet. The real revolution was occurring within herself. With each deliberate choice, she was rewriting the story of who she was in this chapter of her life. Let's explore the remaining 6 actions that completed her path toward reclaiming her visibility and dignity. Number 7, change the script in your mind. Amanda hadn't realized how much of her daily inner dialogue had become a narrative of diminishment. "They're just busy," she would tell herself. "They don't need me anymore," or "this is just what happens when you get older." These thoughts had played so constantly in her mind that she had accepted them as inevitable truths rather than questioning them. One afternoon, while tending her garden, Amanda found herself once again rehearsing these familiar lines of resignation. But this time, she caught herself. What if these weren't facts but merely stories she'd been repeating? What if she could choose different words to narrate her experience? She began deliberately interrupting these thoughts whenever they arose. "When they don't really want me around" surfaced, she would pause and consciously replace it with "I am still becoming. My story continues. My presence has value." At first, these new affirmations felt artificial, almost embarrassing in their optimism. But Amanda persisted, recognizing that the narrative she allowed to run unchallenged in her mind shaped everything. How she carried herself, the energy she brought to interactions, the possibilities she could imagine for her future. Gradually, these new thoughts began to feel more natural. They weren't magical thinking or denial of real challenges. They were simply a more accurate and empowering interpretation of her reality. Yes, family dynamics had changed. Yes, there was distance where there had once been closeness. But the meaning of these facts, that's where she discovered her power to choose. Changing the script in your mind isn't about pretending problems don't exist. It's about refusing to let those problems define who you are or what's possible for you. It's recognizing that while you can't control others' actions, you have absolute authority over the story you tell yourself about those actions and your own worth in the face of them. Do you want more advice like this? Hit subscribe and let's optimize your best years together. Continuing. Number 8. Plant something that outlives you. Amanda had always loved gardening, but it had been primarily annual flowers, bright blooms that lasted a season and then were gone. One spring morning, she stood at the edge of her yard, with a small tree sapling in her hands. It was a red maple, a variety known for its spectacular fall color and longevity. As she dug the hole and carefully positioned the young tree, Amanda was acutely aware that she was planting something she would not see reach its full maturity. This tree would outlive her, perhaps by a century or more. There was something profoundly moving in this act, a reaching forward in time, a gift to a future she would not witness. But Amanda's planting wasn't limited to the literal. She also began volunteering at the Community Historical Society, helping to document and preserve the stories of local families and landmarks. Her nursing experience gave her unique insight into how healthcare had evolved in their town over decades, and she found herself becoming an unexpected resource for this living history. "I never thought my memories would be valuable to anyone," she told Helen after one particularly engaging session, recording her recollections. "But it turns out the ordinary details of how we lived and worked, they matter to the bigger story." Planting something that outlives you isn't about monuments or recognition. It's about connecting to the continuing flow of life beyond your individual experience. It's finding meaning in contribution that extends beyond immediate gratification or acknowledgement. Whether literal seeds in soil or metaphorical seeds of knowledge, service, or creation, these acts answer the pain of being overlooked with the quiet power of lasting impact. Number 9. Choose one day to say nothing about it. The hurt of feeling. Invisible had become a constant undercurrent in Amanda's life, showing up in subtle comments, in sighs, in questions tinged with longing for more attention. She hadn't realized how much of her communication with her family had begun to revolve around this pain, however indirectly expressed. She decided to experiment with one day of complete silence about her feelings of being sidelined. Not suppression or denial, but a deliberate fast from any hint of complaint, any fishing for reassurance, any passive-aggressive comments about how long it had been since their last visit. When David called that Wednesday and apologized for not calling sooner, instead of her usual, "I understand how busy you are," words that carried a weight of resignation and subtle reproach, Amanda simply said, "It's good to hear your voice. Tell me about what's happening with you." The shift was subtle but significant. With the undercurrent of hurt temporarily dammed, the conversation flowed differently. David spoke more freely, even mentioning challenges at work he might otherwise have kept to himself, not wanting to burden his mother, who already seemed to carry so much unspoken sadness. This one-day experiment became a practice Amanda returned to regularly, not because she was denying her feelings, but because she discovered how much mental and emotional space was freed when she wasn't constantly monitoring and communicating her sense of neglect. Choosing one day to say nothing about it isn't about permanent silence or pretending. It's about creating intervals of internal peace where you're not defined by or focused on what's lacking. It's giving yourself and others a rest from the gravitational pull of unmet expectations. In this space of non-demand, connections can sometimes reform in unexpected ways. Number 10. Open the door without waiting at it. Amanda realized she had developed a habit of emotional vigilance, constantly watching for signs of her family's approach, metaphorically standing at the window waiting for them to appear. This stance of perpetual anticipation had exhausted her and, paradoxically, placed pressure on every interaction that did occur. She made a conscious decision to remain emotionally available, but to stop the exhausting practice of watching and waiting. She continued to send birthday cards and occasional texts with articles or photos she thought they might enjoy. She kept their favorite snacks in the pantry for unexpected visits. But she stopped organizing her days around the possibility of their attention. When Emma called, excited about a school project on family heritage and suddenly needing Grandma's stories, Amanda welcomed the interest warmly, but without the desperate gratitude that might have made her granddaughter uncomfortable. She shared generously from her memories, but didn't try to extend the conversation beyond its natural conclusion with anxious questions about when they might talk again. Opening the door without waiting at it is about maintaining connection while releasing the grip of expectation. It's creating space for others to approach freely rather than in response to sensed obligation or guilt. It means being genuinely available when others seek you out, without making that availability feel like a burden they must continually acknowledge or respond to. Number 11, let someone else love you first. For most of her adult life, Amanda had been the primary giver of care and attention in her relationships. Even now, her instinct was always to ask about others, to remember their preferences, to attend to their needs, often while leaving her own unacknowledged. When Helen from next door brought over soup during a week Amanda had a bad cold, her first impulse was to minimize the gesture. "You shouldn't have gone to all that trouble," she said automatically. "Amanda," Helen replied with unexpected firmness, "let me do this for you. You're always the one taking care of everyone else." Something in Helen's tone made Amanda pause. She realized she'd been refusing a gift by deflecting it, not just Helen's soup, but the care it represented. "Thank you," she said instead, accepting the container with genuine gratitude. "It means a lot that you thought of me." This small exchange opened Amanda to a broader recognition. There were people in her life, neighbors, friends from church, former colleagues who valued her and expressed that value in tangible ways. She had been so focused on the attention she wasn't receiving from family that she'd nearly become blind to the care that was already surrounding her. Letting someone else love you first isn't about creating new dependencies or replacing family bonds. It's about opening yourself to the care that may already be present but overlooked. It's recognizing that being loved and valued isn't limited to one source. When you allow yourself to fully receive appreciation from wherever it genuinely flows, you remind yourself that you are indeed deeply lovable, regardless of who might currently be neglecting to see that truth. Number 12. Be the one who reaches out, but from a place of strength. After several months of these inner and outer changes, Amanda felt a noticeable difference in herself. The ache of invisibility hadn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer dominated her emotional landscape. She had found new sources of meaning, new experiences of being valued, new ways of honoring her own journey. From this place of growing strength and clarity, she decided to reach out to David, not from need or hurt, but from the authentic desire to connect. "I was looking through some old photos," she said when he answered her call, "and found that series from the camping trip when you were 10, the one where it rained for 3 days straight and we ended up playing cards in the tent. It made me smile to remember how you insisted we keep track of the scores for the whole week." The conversation that followed was different from their usual exchanges. Amanda wasn't trying to extract attention or guilt David into visiting more. Often, she was simply sharing a genuine moment of connection with her son, and in that authenticity, something shifted. David found himself telling a related memory, one Amanda hadn't heard before, about how those rainy days in the tent had actually been his favorite part of the trip. Being the one who reaches out from strength isn't about making grand gestures or emotional declarations. It's about initiating connection from a centered place within yourself, a place that isn't desperate for response or validation. When you reach out, not to fill an emptiness, but to share a fullness, the quality of connection that becomes possible is transformed. As Amanda implemented these 12 actions over time, she discovered something profound. They weren't magic formulas that instantly fixed her family relationships. Some changes happened quickly, others unfolded more gradually. There were still difficult moments, still times when old patterns reasserted themselves, but the most significant transformation wasn't in how her family treated her, it was in how she carried herself through the continuing reality of her life. The invisible chair no longer contained a person waiting to be noticed. It held someone who had reclaimed her presence in the world, whether or not that presence was perfectly seen or valued by those she most loved. And something unexpected began to happen. As Amanda changed, subtle shifts appeared in her family dynamics, not all at once, and not without occasional backsliding, but the quality of attention during visits gradually deepened. Phone calls, though not more frequent at first, became more genuinely engaged. Emma began asking questions about Amanda's volunteer work. David lingered a little longer after dinner. There was no dramatic moment of recognition or apology. Rather, it was as if the family had unconsciously adjusted to Amanda's new way of being, responding not to demands she wasn't making, but to the quiet dignity she now embodied. Amanda's journey wasn't about dramatic confrontations or emotional ultimatums. It wasn't even primarily about changing her family's behavior. It was about changing her relationship with herself first and allowing everything else to realign. In response to that fundamental shift, 6 months after she began this quiet revolution, Amanda hosted another family dinner. On the surface, it looked much like previous gatherings. The same dining room table, the same faces around it. But an observer would have noticed subtle differences in the atmosphere. Amanda moved through her home with a different energy, more relaxed, less anxiously attentive. The table was beautifully set, but not with the painstaking perfection that had once created an unconscious barrier. There were signs of her expanding life visible throughout the house, books from her reading group, photos from the Historical Society project, a small sculpture she'd begun creating in an art class. When David and his family arrived, Amanda greeted them warmly, but without the intense relief that had once made them unconsciously want to step back from the weight of her expectations. The conversation during dinner flowed more naturally, with Amanda neither straining to be included nor sitting in resigned silence. At one point, Emma asked about the tree sapling visible through the dining room window. "That's my legacy tree," Amanda explained. "It will be here long after I'm gone, growing a little more each year." "Like the stories you're collecting at the Historical Society?" David asked, surprising Amanda with this evidence that he'd been paying attention to her recent activities. "Yes, exactly like that," she replied, pleased but not overly emotional about this small recognition. After dinner, instead of rushing to clear plates while everyone else moved to the living room, Amanda accepted Elaine's offer to help with the dishes. As they worked side by side, a comfortable silence between them, Elaine said something unexpected. "You seem different lately, Amanda. More, I don't know, present in your own life." It was perhaps the most direct acknowledgement of the change that had taken place. Amanda smiled. "I am," she said simply. "I decided to stop waiting to be seen and start seeing myself more clearly first." That night, after everyone had gone home, Amanda sat in her favorite chair by the window, the same spot where months earlier she had begun this journey. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty in the same way. The silence had a different quality, not the echo of absence, but the fullness of peace. Had everything been perfectly resolved? No. There would still be times when old patterns reasserted themselves, still moments of feeling overlooked or undervalued. The 12 actions Amanda had taken weren't a magic formula that erased all challenges in family relationships, but something fundamental had shifted, both in how she experienced herself and in how her family experienced her. By reclaiming her own dignity and purpose, she had created space for new, more authentic connections to form, not based on obligation or role, but on genuine recognition of each other as continuing, evolving human beings. What Amanda discovered is something each of us can learn as we navigate the complex territory of aging in a world that often renders older adults invisible. Our power lies not in demanding that others see us differently, but in choosing to see ourselves with fresh eyes first. The path from invisibility to presence begins with this recognition. You are not defined by who recognizes your worth. Your journey continues, your growth matters. Your choices create ripples that extend far beyond what you can currently see. So what about you? As you sit with Amanda's story, perhaps you recognize elements of your own experience in hers. Perhaps you too have felt the sting of being overlooked, the gradual sense of becoming background rather than foreground in the lives of those you love most. How might your life begin to shift if you adopted even a few of these 12 actions? What would change if you disappeared gracefully for a while, creating space for your absence to be felt? What room in your home is waiting to be reclaimed as a reflection of who you are becoming, not just who you've been? What message have you carried unspoken that needs expression, even if only for yourself? Could you create a ritual that honors your continuing journey? What question might you ask that could open a door to new understanding? Where might your wisdom and presence be, valued outside the bounds of family, creating new legacies with those who are eager to receive what you uniquely offer? Can you imagine changing the script that runs through your mind, planting something that extends beyond your own lifetime, choosing even one day of freedom from the narrative of neglect? What would it feel like to open the door without anxiously waiting beside it, to fully receive the care that may already be surrounding you from unexpected sources, to reach out from a place of inner strength rather than need? These aren't just philosophical questions. They are invitations to practical action, small, dignified choices that can gradually transform not just your family relationships, but your entire experience of this chapter of your life. The beauty of this approach lies in its gentleness. It doesn't require confrontation or demand. It doesn't depend on others changing first. It begins with you, with small shifts in how you see yourself and how you move through your days. And from those small beginnings, larger transformations become possible. I encourage you to choose just one of these actions to begin with. Perhaps one resonated with you more strongly than the others. Start there. Give yourself permission to experiment, to discover what feels authentic for you. Remember that this is not about following a precise formula, but about finding your own path back to visibility and connection. And as you take these steps, be patient, both with yourself and with those around you. Patterns that have developed over years don't typically change overnight. There may be awkward moments, confusion, even resistance as the familiar dynamics begin to shift. That's normal and to be expected. What matters is the direction of change, not its speed. Each time you choose dignity over invisibility, purpose over resignation, self-respect over desperate pleading for attention, you are writing a new story for this chapter of your life. Like Amanda, you may find that the most profound transformation isn't actually in how others treat you, though that may indeed change over time. The real revolution is in how you experience yourself as someone whose journey continues to matter, whose growth remains vital, whose presence in the world has ongoing significance. What's one lesson this story reminded you of? I'd love to read about it in the comments. Because the truth is this, you have never actually been invisible. What has been obscured, perhaps by changing family dynamics, by society's narrow view of aging, or by your own diminished expectations, is not your value but the recognition of it. That recognition can begin anew, right now, with your own clear seeing of who you are and what you bring to this moment in time. The chair you occupy is not empty or overlooked, except to those who have forgotten how to truly see. Your life is not a diminishing epilogue, but a continuing story of meaning, growth, and connection, if you choose to claim it as such. So I ask you, how will you step back into visibility? Not through demand or desperation, but through the quiet power of reclaiming your own dignity. What first small action will you take to remind yourself, and eventually others, that your presence matters, your wisdom counts, your journey continues? The invitation is before you, and the next chapter begins with your choice. Like and subscribe if you're committed to becoming the best version of yourself. Thanks for watching.